UKIP spokesperson Neil Hamilton.
Brexit is probably going to have a greater impact on agriculture than almost any other sector, obviously because it's regulated under the CAP and funded largely through the European Union. The government therefore has to be thinking ahead very deeply about what's going to be our agricultural regime after we've left the European Union. I've been reading the minutes of the European Advisory Group, which the First Minister established 6 months ago, to see what their thinking is. And I'm surprised to discover that agriculture hasn't featured at all as yet in their considerations. And that may be related to the fact there's only one member who has any recognisable agricultural credentials amongst those who have been appointed to it. So I wonder if this indicates that the Welsh Government isn't perhaps terribly interested in the future of agriculture in our country.
Not at all, and I think the agriculture sector would tell the member how pleased they are with the stakeholder engagement that we've had. You'll be aware that straight after the vote to leave the European Union, I began stakeholder events. I think at the end of this month we'll have, I think it's either the 6th or the 7th one. Ministerial engagement is very firmly now set in our calendars. We meet once a month, so during recess all the agriculture and environment ministers met in Scotland. We are working very closely together. I mentioned that officials from all 4 UK countries are currently meeting as we speak. So there has been a huge amount of input into the future of agriculture. During recess, I attended the NFU conference in Birmingham, where I did a debate with George Eustace, the UK Agriculture Minister, and I have to say the Welsh delegates made it very clear that we are far in advance of any other country with our engagement.
Well, I'm very pleased to hear that, and I can say from my own experience talking to people who are involved in groups that represent agriculture and farming, that they're pleased with the level of engagement that you have given them. But I don't know whether you've yet had a chance to read the policy statement on Brexit, which has been published by NFU Cymru, but one of the positive things that they say in there is that leaving the European Union gives us the opportunity to review the regulations which currently affect farming and agriculture. And they say that poor regulation is the reason for a lack of farm business confidence, and this is related to the costs of compliance, time given over to compliance and to demonstrating compliance, and these add significantly to farmers' workload. And so without wanting to throw the baby out with the bathwater and get rid of all regulation, it is a great opportunity for us to review the effectiveness of regulation and whether it imposes disproportionate costs for the public benefits which are supposed to flow from it. Can the Cabinet Secretary tell the Assembly that the Welsh Government will look seriously at reviewing regulation, reducing its impact on farmers without compromising other public safety and other objectives?
Well, we're going to have to review it because clearly when all the powers from the EU come back to Wales, we will then have the opportunity to have our Welsh agricultural policy. And clearly, you know, regulation, if you ask many farmers who did vote leave why they voted leave, regulation is cited as one of the reasons. I don't think it helped that the UK Tory, or some of the UK Tory ministers were saying, you know, that we would be decreasing particularly our environmental regulations. That is not going to happen, and I've made that very clear. If anything, we will strengthen them. But I think it is a very good opportunity to have a look at regulation, talking in partnership with the sector to make sure that the regulation is correct. And you know, again, that's one of the things that we are talking about in our stakeholder events.
Well, I thank the Cabinet Secretary for that answer. It does, of course, give us, Brexit does give us the freedom to introduce new regulations and controls as well in areas where we might have wished to do so but have been thwarted in the past by the lack of enthusiasm on the part of our other partners in the European Union. And one of these areas is live export of animals, for example, which we've been prevented from banning, and also introducing regulations in relation to animal welfare. For example, the maximum 8-hour journey time for animals travelling for fattening and slaughter. So can the Cabinet Secretary give me an assurance that measures of this kind may be on the agenda as well?
I think everything's on the agenda, to be perfectly honest with you. We are wading through a huge amount of regulations and legislation. Just in agriculture and fisheries in my own portfolio, there's 5,000 pieces of legislation and regulation. So I think, I have said that I really want to work very closely with the sector to make sure we have the absolute best policy. But one thing we have made very clear to the UK government time after time is that when those powers come from the EU, the powers that are ours, they're not theirs to be repatriated, they are ours from the beginning, and we will ensure that we have a fit-for-purpose policy.
Question